And so you can try and justify and over-explain why their feedback isn't valid. So I think for an example of leading self, it's kind of like you can react to whatever's coming at you, or you can respond to whatever's coming at you. And you have the choice to make it meaningful.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Fireside Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Turkington. And on the show today, we've got Jaimee McAleese. Jaimee is an Olympian. She's a GM of people, and she's also a leadership coach. So we're stoked to have her on the show today. Jaimee, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Chris. We're really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, so am I. And I guess I want to crack straight into it. So, you've competed at the highest level, top 5 in the world for your chosen endeavor and everything that goes with that, an Olympian. What did being an Olympian teach you about pressure and about performance?
I think there's so many lessons along the way, but I think like ultimately when I got to the Olympic stage, my journey until that point had really been about trying to perform. And I think performing from a place of needing to perform, a place of I can't not perform. And so for many years, it was all about I have to succeed in this race. The data says I'm good. I have to be seen. I have to get X placing or X time. And what was quite interesting is the 18 months in the lead up to the Olympics. I remember one of my coaches sitting me down and saying, "Why do you put them on a pedestal?" I'm like, "Who?" He's like, all those other competitors. And I'm like, "Well, because they're so good." And he's like, "Well, you've been competing with them for the last 10 years. And in the last 2 years, you've won, multiple World Cup medals, but still you're putting them on a pedestal." And I was like, "Oh shit, it's not actually something I've ever said out loud before." And I think that was kind of a turning point for me to sort of think about how have I been racing for most of my career? And I put it down to now, it was a place I was racing from protection, a place of fear, like fear of failure, fear of being judged, fear of also a little bit of a fear of success because it will then set the bar. And so that expectation. And so for that 18 months leading into the Olympics, I really focused on like, who am I and who do I want to be when I line up on that start line at the Olympic Games? Like, what does it feel like? What does it look like to me? And I sort of really went down this journey of self-leadership and how when I turn up to the Olympic Games, knowing that I deserve to be there, that I have earned my stripes, and that I'm actually there to compete. And I think what that taught me about pressure was that if you're solid in yourself and you're not trying to be somebody else or be there for somebody else, then you can still feel the pressure, but you can still lock into who you are in the moment. And so I think for many years, it was the pressure would eat me. The pressure would own me in mid-race or in the moment. And when I got there, it was like, actually, I can feel the pressure. I know you're there. The pressure's there because this is really meaningful to me because I really want to express a lifetime of work like I've wanted to be here since I was 8 years old. And so I think for me, it was really about learning that pressure is a good thing. And it's what you use, how you use that information to apply to the moment that you're in.
There's so much there to unpack straight off the bat. Like, how did you make that switch between being fear-driven, obsessed on the outcome, worried about that, to be more like almost internally driven and focused? Like, how did you even start to attack that, Jaimee? Because that's a big piece of work, right?
It's a massive piece of work. I think the journey's continued, right?
Yeah, totally.
But at that point in time, I was really lucky to work with a sports psychologist called David Galbraith. And he's done a bit of work with the All Blacks and Lisa Carrington, Sarah Walker. And I managed to get a couple of sessions with him. And it was really funny because I had worked with sports psychs many times throughout my career. But the first thing he said to me was, "Why are you here?" I was like, "So you can help me." And he's like, "Help you with what?" And I'm like, race better." And he's like, "Well, why do you need me to help you race better?" And then we sort of had this discussion around, I get to the middle of the race and suddenly my body just shuts down. And all of the data says that that shouldn't happen. It's just like, it's like this lead that it stops. And he goes, "And what are you thinking?" I was like, "Well, when I'm on the start line, I'm thinking about how far I'm going to get to before my body shuts down, before this, like this sort of wave closes me in." And he's like, "Okay." So we need to pull that back a bit. So anyway, long story short, we got to a point where he was like, okay, so your biggest hurdle right now is that you're so afraid of what everybody else thinks about you that you're not even thinking about what you need to do in that moment. So you're on that start line, you're thinking about what is everybody at the end of that line going to think about me when I finish? What if I don't get X spot? My parents are in the crowd, and like I was very external. And so he's like, we're gonna go inward, and all you're gonna think about is who is Jaimee and who is the version of Jaimee that is gonna line up on the start line at the Olympic Games and be wholeheartedly comfortable and happy with who she is and what she's there to do. Sounds really simple, but the journey was like so challenging. And this sounds stupid, but one of the hardest tasks and the first task he got me to do was to go sit at a bus stop, and I wasn't allowed my phone or headphones or anything like that that could block out the external world. And I had to strike up a conversation with 5 people, 5 random people, and just have genuine conversations and connection. I'm such an introvert, and that was so hard. I think I remember walking around that past the bus stop probably about 4 or 5 times where I sat down. And then the first target I picked was this elderly lady because I thought she'll be nice to me.
Less threatening.
Yeah, and I found that particular task really challenging and could not understand what that had to do with performance. But it was all about me, right? Like it was all about the internal narrative and catching those thoughts and not really worrying about all these other people who probably not even didn't even notice that you're sitting there.
And that's it. Like further down the line, they probably won't even recall the conversation, right? It's just a blip on the day's radar.
Yeah, 100%.
Man, that's super interesting. And can I ask, when you went down and dialed it all back to the base level, who was Jaimee? Like when you went through that, that's an extended process, sort of knowing what we know. Share what you're comfortable with, but what did that start to look like when you unpacked all of that?
Yeah, I guess I went back to an 8-year-old with really big dreams. And I think underneath all of that was someone who is such a perfectionist, right? Like there's something I've really battled with most of my life is perfectionism, and everything has to be perfect. And that's an ongoing journey, but also someone with really high expectations and a huge fear of failing, a huge fear of not being good enough, of what if I fail? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for my reputation? My parents had invested so much in me at this point in time. Like, what if I fail? What if I don't get there? And I think underneath all of those layers I was just so driven by fear. And I think sometimes when you're a high performer, but you're driven by sort of this fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being good enough, it looks like ambition.
Mm.
Like it looks like you're really disciplined and you're really ambitious and you're all of these things that people would say as a high performer. But if it's coming from a place of I'm protecting myself because I don't want anyone to see all of this fear underneath, it doesn't serve you that well in some of those high pressure moments.
Yeah, that's so good. And it segues really nicely. Like the more people, we're privileged to talk with people like yourself on this show and get into the minds of some very, very successful people in whatever their domain is. Things that are coming up they're all the same. It doesn't matter what they've achieved or what level they're at or what they do. It's just like inherently human stuff, eh? Fear of being judged, fear of failing, wanting people to like you, uh, self-doubt, terrible internal narrative, like obsessing over like perceived slights or insults, or this person said this critical thing on social media, so I'm pissed off about that. Like it doesn't really seem to matter where people get to. Like these human things continue to happen. Hey, what's up, guys? Just a quick note to say, hopefully you're enjoying the show. If you are, feel free to like and subscribe, and you can share it with your mates. You can also find us at LinkedIn and on Facebook, or check us out at www.aegisleadership.co.nz. Cool, that's all from me. Let's get back to the show. But experiencing what you have, Jaimee, like how do you now deal with self-doubt and, that negative internal narrative? Because I guess it's always going to be there like a shitty radio station in the background, but like how do you deal with it now?
I think it comes with maturity as well, and age. And for me, it was probably wasn't really until about 5 years ago when I sort of looked back at my journey and thought about how do athletes who have experienced years of high pressure moments, how do we convert that into a corporate space? Because even though you'd been in those environments, right, like you had probably experienced more pressure than someone in a corporate position would ever experience in their lifetime. And you've managed to compact that into potentially 10 years of your life. But, trying to kind of really unpack and reflect on some of those lessons that I've learned and apply them to corporate leadership has been really helpful, because it's the same feelings and the same patterns I see reoccurring, but just a different environment. And I think for me, I have enough awareness of when I know I'm getting in my own way. It doesn't necessarily mean to say that I always get out of my own way. So I think it's also having really good people around you that can be like, you know what, you're making an excuse here. You know that you are stopping yourself from making that step because it's uncomfortable. And so I think for me now, it's like accepting that growth is uncomfortable. You know that, you need to experience discomfort in order to grow. So it's also, I think, recognizing that when I am in discomfort, is it good discomfort? Like, is it growth discomfort? Or is it something that I need to deal with in order to move past it?
And has a lot of it come down to the way that you talk to yourself? Has that been like a big part of your work?
Yeah, 100%. I think I never really used to sort of intentionally talk to myself. Like there'd just be that quiet chat in your head that you'd catch, and it'd be like, oh, that's not good. But sometimes I'll just tell myself to shut up. I was like, oh my God, Jaimee, shut up. Just move, just get over it, kind of thing. And sometimes I'll say it out loud too, which makes you look a little bit crazy.
It is. And K4, so K4 kayaking was your discipline. You
Mm.
and three other people in that boat. What did operating in a crew like that teach you about leadership?
Oh, so much. And I think again, like I'll go back to teams in sport in those really high pressure moments, you see the best of people and you see the worst of people, right? Like you
Yes.
see the best of yourself and you see the worst of yourself. And I think for me, the biggest takeaways from working in a team was seeing the parts of myself that I didn't like. And the parts of myself I was like, man, I handled that so poorly. And I think you can take that into any other sort of role that you do, but I think pressure can do really funny things to people, and stress and expectations. And I think in a team, if you don't have a really strong, cohesive goal that you're all working towards, it's really difficult to deal with the different personalities and the different nuances that sort of happen. And if you think like, for me, for example, I had all these fears that I was trying to deal with internally, and they would have been expressed externally to my team in some way. Everybody else is having that same experience. And so I think one of the biggest takeaways that I learned from being in a team in a high pressure environment like that is that leading yourself is so crucial to the success of everybody else.
Yeah.
And there are certainly moments where it's like, okay, right now my teammate needs me to step up, which means that I just need to swallow that moment, deal with it later. And right now we just need to be in the moment and we've got to get this boat moving. So I think a lot of it's also putting the ego to the side too, which when you're in a sports team can be quite hard at times. Athletes tend to have a bit of an ego, even if it's not loud and expressive.
Particularly, like, you're there for a reason. That sharp edge has served you and taken you to varying degrees to where you are, right? So it's not that it's a bad thing, it's just it probably needs to be harnessed in a
Mm,
constructive way.
yeah.
I'm curious around lead self. Lead self, it's a term that we hear a lot. It's certainly used in the military context a lot. But what does lead self actually mean to you? Like, what does that look like practically?
Yeah. So I guess for me, it's really about emotional regulation, self
Yeah.
awareness. It's about ensuring that, like, I mean, you can be in a situation, right? Say, for example, somebody gives you feedback. That's an opportunity for you to either let it land as information and respond from, okay, so there's some information in this that I can take and I can apply. There's some information here that maybe isn't so relevant. Or you can take it from, they don't think I'm good enough, they're judging me, and I'm going to get really defensive here. And so you can try and justify and over explain why their feedback isn't valid. And so I think for an example of leading self, it's kind of like you can react to whatever's coming at you, or you can respond to whatever's coming at you. And you have the choice to make it meaningful about who you are, or you have the choice to use it for what it is. And then being able to, I guess, take that into a team environment is like, well, if you're leading others, it comes back to that classic, like, lead by example. Like the thing that you get told in primary school, like, lead by example. And I think by doing that is being able to be honest, to be vulnerable, but also to step up when you need to, and lead your team through leading yourself, not putting expectations on them that you wouldn't come to the party with
For
yourself.
sure. I think, like, yeah, it is. It's pretty cliche around lead by example, but how many leaders have we seen, high performers, that they're people of very few words? They don't say much, but it's just the way they hold themselves, their character, their internal standards. And like,
Mm,
they're obviously hold themselves to an incredibly high level, but they're very compassionate and understanding with others. And yeah, they don't really need to say too much because their actions speak so loud that no one could hear their words anyway. I think, and I also think that's a requirement. If you're getting up and saying all these things, but then you're not backing it with behavior, it doesn't mean anything. It's just hollow words, right? Like, I think action and behavior is everything. The words just sort of top it off,
yeah, I agree with that. And people are always watching, right? Like,
always.
if you're leading a team, even if it's not your direct team, people are always watching. They notice the little things. They notice if you aren't, you get in the morning and you don't say hello. Or if they notice if you're the one that always says hello, you always make the time. And it might be a couple of minutes to have a quick conversation and check in, versus the ones that never do that. They're always rush, 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 rush. Even though, everyone's always busy, but I think it's all those little actions that you take that create the representation of who you are as a leader.
And like a little trigger that we have is each day just try not to be a hypocrite. Like and again that's probably driven from fear and all the rest of it, no doubt. But it's a nice little reminder each day, like, hey, you talk a good game and we're talking about all these things, but what are you actually doing to back that up? So yeah, that's a cool one. Can you talk a little bit around coming from extremely high performance sport, Olympics, moving into the corporate world? What was that adjustment like, and sort of how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, it was hard. So I finished after Rio, which is it was a real it's a really funny one because I wholeheartedly knew that my time was done. So I had that sitting on one side, and that was because I knew I had all these other things that I wanted to achieve. I was 28 at the time, um, and the other part of me was like, well, but I'm only really just hitting my straps. Like, like the performance is only just starting to come together. I'm only 28. I've got definitely another cycle in me. But ultimately, that choice came down to, do I want this more than anything else? Because you need to have that. Like, this is the most important thing in my life right now. And it will be for at least the next 4 years, because everything goes in a 4-year cycle. I'm in line with the Olympic Games. And so it's for me, it was like, nah, that's not where I am. Like, I want it, but I don't want it enough to put everything else on hold for another 4 years. And so I think I continued paddling for maybe another 6 months, just sort of casually, until I figured out what I was going to do in my life. But in that 6 months, it was like a full blown identity crisis. I'm like, what do I want to do? Who am I? Like, I studied HR, and I was like, I don't really want to go back to HR, but I don't really know what else I want to do.
Yeah,
Who am
yeah,
I now? Like, it was a pretty rough time in terms of identity. I think identity is a huge one. And when I talk about it now, I kind of think, you know, I raced from presence, what I'd call presence now at the Olympics. So that real calm under pressure, locked in under pressure. But I mastered that particular arena. I didn't master life at that point, because it was a version of me, right? Like, it was just this athlete, and that had been my identity for most of my life.
totally.
And so moving away from that was like, well, who am I now? Like, I'm just a normal person. Like, I'm not this high performance athlete anymore. I'm not in this routine. I don't have this system and these people around me, and I don't have the structure that I've had for forever.
Mm.
And so it was kind of like, well, I'm on my own now. And who am I and what did I do? So kind of Took one job and happened to land in Hawke's Bay, which is where my husband is from. And I was there about 6 months and I was like, no, this is not me. And then I moved into HR and I was like, well, I know this game, so let's just go back there. And I always wondered how I ended up in this role because I'm so introverted. I've always been really, really shy and not sure how to end up in a role that requires you to have really courageous conversations all of the time and hold really strong boundaries and support people and sort of their moments of need. I'm like, how did I end up here? But I guess almost 10 years later now, I can see exactly why I ended up here is because I guess I love that just helping people grow and seeing that development and how stoked they are when they recognize how far they've moved and the level
Yeah,
of
yeah.
confidence that they can gain and just seeing their progression and not only their career but in their life is something that I've always really enjoyed.
Mm.
Yeah, so it was a really challenging journey. I think what I figured out was how to utilize my skills as an athlete to catapult my career. So, I went all in, like I treated it like I am going to the Olympic Games. But in my career, like I was essentially restarting at 28. I'd had 3 or 4 years off from any work, and the jobs that I took prior to that were all conditioned to fit around being able to train.
Yeah.
So I had never really chased the roles that I wanted because it was all about being an athlete and this ultimate goal of becoming an Olympian. And so for the first time in my life, I was like, wow, okay, this is the next phase and I want to be here. How do I get there as quick as possible?
Yeah.
And so I guess I just figured out how to apply the skills that I'd learned as an athlete to make that happen.
Yeah, I want to touch on that really quickly, but I really resonated with what you said there around trying to figure out who you are and what your identity is. Like, I'm not an Olympian by any stretch of the imagination, but played sports to a reasonably high level and for a long time. And I was the same. I think it took me 3 years stewing over should I finish playing cricket. Like, it was at least 3 seasons of like what's kind of next. And I've played cricket since I was 4, and like that, on the face of it, it sounds real stupid, eh? But like, man, that's a tough little battle to have with yourself.
Yeah, I think like as humans, we don't often sit and look and ask ourselves, who are we?
Mm.
Like, who am I? What is really important to me? What do I value? What do those values look like in action? Like, for a long time, I thought value sessions were a waste of time. Like, they're absolute bullshit. And I think it was because I'd never seen any of my leaders lead from a place of value and lead those values. And so I'm like, well, we're in this value session, but everyone's going to forget about it. And we're all just here trying to come up with a really cool slogan and some words on paper that sound
Service
really
type
cool.
stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you pick up on that fast, eh? Like whether people actually believe it or not. Like, we're incredibly intuitive with body language and tone and
Mm.
all those things. Like the majority of it's nonverbal. So you'll know straight away whether people are buying into things or not. And if they're not, you're like, what's the point? I have to know now. So you mentioned those skills that you honed in the high performance setting and using those to catapult yourself into the business world, which that's a high performance mindset right there. But what were those? Can you touch on a few of those things or character traits or like technical skill sets? What did you use to try and accelerate your path in the business world?
Yeah, I think like for me, it was all about discipline. Like, I'd come from a really disciplined environment, right? Like you turn up, you do the work, and discipline was a big one, but also like I knew fundamentally that at 28, if I didn't take the opportunities that were in front of me, I'd quite quickly be 38 and still in the same role.
Hmm.
And so I knew that I wanted a career that took me on a pathway to leadership in the corporate world. And I knew that part of that was being seen. Part of that was putting your hand up for opportunities that potentially you didn't quite know how you're going to figure it out, but you would figure it out. But also just delivering good quality work. And I think it was just sort of that mindset around if I don't know how to do it now, I'll figure out how I'm going to do it and I'll deliver this piece of work. And in sport, I think you're always in this like cocoon almost. You're protected in a way, like you're in this environment where you know everybody, you're comfortable, you're cushioned, and you've got these really strong support systems around you. and then you kind of move into a corporate space and it just doesn't operate quite the same. Like those relationships aren't as structured and strong, and as much as people are there to support you, it's not quite the same. And so
Yeah.
I think I figured that out quite early as well. And that's like anything in life, right? Like if you want something, you have to put your foot forward. Like you have to go after it. You can't wait for people to come to you. And I think for the first couple of years, I really did that. Like I was like, well, if I work really hard and if I do good quality work, then they're going to see how good I could be.
Yeah, yeah, for
But it
sure.
doesn't work like that.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess like in the high performance setting, it's its own echo chamber, eh? And they've essentially removed all of the distractions of life so much so that you can just focus on the one thing. And the one thing is paddling that boat to the absolute best of your ability, right? Man, yeah, that was life real noisy when you got out of that echo chamber?
It was, I think, because I was so lost for a while. It was just, yeah, I don't, it was like a fog. Like I can't even remember a good chunk of it because I was just like in this place where I was like, what am I even doing with my life? Like, who am I now? Like, I think I went through this full blown identity crisis without even realizing that that's what it was.
Yeah, true. Crazy. And, you know, we've spoken about discipline. Everybody knows, you know, doing things you need to do even when you can't be bothered doing them. That's
Mm.
kind of what we see as discipline. Is that something you just had, or was that something you had to develop on your path? And what was that like? Because a 4-year Olympic cycle sounds brutal as, and I'm going to say there's a lot of days where you just couldn't be bothered. How did, talk to us about discipline? What does it mean to you? And how did you just keep fronting up, even though you were probably fatigued, over it, whatever it might be? Can you talk to that a little bit, Jaimee?
Yeah, there are definitely moments where I think I had let myself down in terms of I'm too tired today and I'm going to find an excuse to get out of this. But those days were pretty few and far between. I think when I look back at like in that athlete life, I don't even know if it was discipline more so than expectation.
Mm.
It's just what is expected of you in order to achieve this goal. And if you don't meet those standards, then you can't be in this system. So yeah, I don't know if, I think as a byproduct of that, it taught me discipline when I wasn't in that environment. But in that environment, it was expectation. It was, these are our standards. You meet the standard or you don't, you don't
See
belong
you later.
here in a way. Yeah. And so everybody knew that. Like and you're always fighting for your spot, right? Like there's always somebody else coming up behind you that is waiting for you to fall over so they can sit in your seat. And I think one of the biggest fears you have too as an athlete is you can qualify that boat for the Olympic Games, but that doesn't mean you're sitting in it the next year.
Just always, yeah, you're fighting for survival essentially at the crux of it, right?
Mm.
And not
Yeah.
only that, but you're probably training with your potential replacements.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. And it's really hard, I think, like when you think about teams and you're kind of like, let's bring everybody on the journey, like let's rise each other and bring each other up as we go. And it's really hard to remember that when you're fighting for something that you've been fighting for most of your life. And you're like, and I sort of talked about there were moments where I'm like, I wasn't really proud of how I reacted there. A lot of those moments were from a place of, I don't want her to get any better because then what if she gets better and beats me and then I don't get my seat? I qualified this boat, like
Yeah.
there's definitely moments like that where you're like, that's not cool, Jaimee.
And sure, but like when you think about it logically, it's like you've got all of these people that are obsessive over this one thing, have been since they were children, are
Yeah.
literally in direct competition with each other, under stress, they're fatigued. Like it's really, really understandable that you had a lot of these impulsive reactions, right? Like when you in the cold light of day look at it, it's like if it didn't happen, it would probably be abnormal.
Yeah. And I think everybody responds in different ways. Like one of my biggest work on was I would shut down. So I wouldn't be someone who's explosive or super reactive in a way where I'd say something terrible, but I'd shut down. And a lot of that was I just didn't even know how to deal with it. Like, I'm like, what am I feeling and what do I do with all of that stuff? I didn't have the language to articulate what it was. And so my response was I'm just not going to talk. And that's also not helpful for a team.
Yeah, yeah. It's because People don't know where you're at, what you're thinking, like how to get through to you, anything like that.
No, and it just reminds me, like now I'm really like your mood sets a tone as a leader. And, I was the oldest in the boat. So as a consequence of that was a leader within the team. And I think about some of those moments that I had where I was like, man, I was so moody. And where I just wouldn't talk to anybody because I just didn't know how to deal with all the stuff in my head. And now I'm kind of like, well, I would never, never in my life would I turn up to work and express myself in that way now. But that's come from a place of like, I've experienced that, I've learned that, I didn't like that, and it doesn't work.
For sure. And like you did right there, we see it all the time. You set the tone with your energy. We speak with a lot of leaders. They're like, "Oh, I just can't get my team motivated. They don't seem that interested. They're not engaged." But when this person gets up the front of the briefing room and they're briefing their team or whatever it might be, they're super flat. They're negative in their language. It's just like, well, what do you expect? You expect your team's going to be fired up by that? Like they're going to mirror your energy, right? So obviously in an authentic way, but you want to get up, you want to be optimistic, enthusiastic, and frame it up like, hey guys, this is going to be hard, this is going to be tough, but we're going to win. And people get onto that energy, right? Like if
Mhm.
you're the opposite, you're up there and you're a wet flannel, then you can't expect your team to respond to that, I don't think.
Now, well, how would you respond to something like that?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I want to talk about habits and routines, rituals, whatever. So high performers, normally they have them, they love them, they have things that work for them. What stuck by you through the years as far as habits, routines, rituals, Jaimee? Very, very curious.
I'm such a creature of habit, so much so that I've had to really learn how to pivot and adapt to life that isn't structured the way that I want it to be. I think kids have really helped with that. But I think habits for me is I still like to go to bed early and get up early, like I did as an athlete, and that's just part of, I think, my DNA now. I still need to move my body, and every day is usually something like I can't exercise on Sundays because Sunday was always our off day, and for
Rest
me,
and
I'm just
recovery
like,
day. Yeah.
it's just a recovery. Like you just don't exercise on Sundays. I just can't get that out of my head. I mean, you could have another day in the week, but for me, it's just got to be Sunday. And so moving my body is always something that has to happen. And I know that the days where it slips or the weeks where it slips, I can really feel how much it impacts how I show up. And my tolerance and my resilience, I think, is really, I need that for my own mental well-being. So that's probably one of the habits that have stuck. Yeah, sleep routines. I have a very high sleep need. So my kids are all really good sleepers because
Did
mum
you
needs
sleep
to
train
sleep.
them?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My wife's exactly the
um,
same with our
yeah,
kids. Yeah.
yeah. And my twins, they sleep fine because they're next to each other. So that's been like easier than the first one. What else? What else do I keep? I'm just I have to complete things, but I also like, so this is really contradictory because I have to complete something, but also I always have so many tabs open and so many half done things. So I'm always in this real constant battle of I need to get this thing finished because I was always so used to task complete, move next one. But in my role, like I could have a priority list and that goes out the window if there's something I have to deal with. So I've kind of learned to become less structured because that was a very habitual thing for me was structure. I eat breakfast at this time. I go to training here. I eat again here. I go the next. Like it was
It's
always
all
like very
optimized.
structured routine,
Yeah.
very optimized.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's to be fair, my life now is very different from the routine that I had, but I still really need structure. So we try as best as we can to kind of keep structure. Like our kids are probably like bloody, like they're in the military. They have a bedtime routine, and that routine is like to the minute every single night, and that's just part of that structure, so that we can function and get what we need in order to kind of keep that balance and everything, the wheels turning as efficiently as possible,
Yeah.
which is probably another habit is always looking for efficiencies.
And like, I really agree with that structure thing. I think without it, it's chaotic. And I think that burns a lot of energy and a lot of cognitive bandwidth. And you see what happens with kids when they're out of routine. Like they just lose it, right?
Mm.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm a big fan of that. And then I guess looking back on it all, you probably had a lot of time to reflect and will continue to do so. But when you look back, what are you most proud of?
Oh, that's a big question. And I have thought about this a lot. And I think I remember telling someone the story about the Olympics, and they're like, well, I did this. They said something like, well, didn't you quit because you didn't get a medal? Um, and I
That's a
was
bit
like,
rude.
it was funny. The moment was funny. And I was like, well, no, I didn't quit because I didn't get a medal. But I think the proudest moment for me was lining up on that start line and being able to race from a place of I'm so excited to express all of the work that I've done, rather than a place of I'm so shit scared of losing this race. And I think that was where I raced from for majority of my career. So my proudest moment was being able to, you know, recognize that I'd done enough work that I could line up on the pinnacle event of my life that I've been working towards for, since I was 8, and feel proud to be there wearing the black singlet, feel proud that my family are in the stands, and feel proud that I've got the opportunity to express all of that work in this moment with my teammates and acknowledge that it has been a long journey and it's been a hard journey and we have an opportunity here to win a medal, and just be in that moment. So I think that would by far outweigh any of the other medals or races or anything that I've kind of accomplished in my career.
That's so cool. And what's the message, Jaimee? People are going to be listening to this. What's the message that you want them to take away from this chat we've had today?
I think it starts from the inside out is the chat. Like I've experienced many years of worrying about the outside and then trying to deal with that internally. And then in those last few years and since then it's starting in and then moving out. And I think recognizing that self-doubt will never go away because any new level you unlock, there's going to be an element of doubt, but it's just information. And it's your brain hasn't had the experience to tell you whether it's going to be a good one or not. And so it's just trying to protect you from the unknown. And so taking action that, you know what, you might fail, but what's the worst that's going to happen? And you know what, people might judge you, but who cares? They're probably the people from high school that you haven't spoken to in 20 years. And so I think just trusting yourself to take those steps that you need to take to get to where you want to go. And that any leadership work or any big goals that you have to be solid on the inside on where you want to go, what you want to achieve, and trust yourself first.
Yeah, that's a great place to finish. And where can people go to check you out these days, Jaimee, and see what you're up to?
Well, I've started to try and be a bit more active on LinkedIn. It's
Nice.
it's really hard. It's really hard to be consistent there, but I've set myself a goal to be more consistent. And again, like taking messy action, being unafraid of what other people are going to think.
It's going to take about 1,000 reps just to get like basic level capability. So just do
Yeah.
the reps, right?
Yep. 10,000 hours.
You got it. You got it. So yeah, LinkedIn. They can find you on LinkedIn. Amazing. And yeah, we're guessing in the next couple of years it'll be optimized because you'll see it through to the end.
Yeah. I'll figure out how to make it as efficient as possible.
Yeah, nice. Hey, Jaimee, thanks very much, man. It's been a great chat and some awesome stuff in there for people to take away, I think.
No, thanks for having me.
Cool. And hey, guys, if you enjoyed that chat, then you can check us out at www.aegisleadership.co.nz, or you can follow us on LinkedIn and on Facebook. That's all for today. Catch you next time.